Well, I guess we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you for all you that have joined or those that are speaking for coming to our virtual online tree sale open house. Again, this is the Crowing SWCD tree sale open house. And just to give a little background, we've been doing this tree sale program for over 22 years. And to date, landowners, I should say, not us, but landowners have planted over 80 or 800 and what is the number? Oh yeah, there it is. 800,343 trees were planted because of this program. And so our goal again is to reach 1 million trees for Crow Wing County. And we know that these trees and plants are providing healthy soil and cleaner water for our community. And we are grateful to be able to partner with landowners to plant these trees. So the goal of the open house is just to be able to provide people additional information, connect people with additional resources. So we have 3 different speakers. They're going to talk about different programs that are available to landowners. And then at the end of this, we'll have some time to you'll be able to ask your specific questions. And so my name is Melissa Barrick, and I'm the district manager for the Crow Wing Soil and Water Conservation District. We also have on the call Sheila Bolt. I don't know if you just want to wave. And she will also be able to help you. Tasha Lauer is on the call. She does all of the online ordering for us. And then Adam Molesky. And then we also have Clayton Link and Bethany Champlin on the call. So all of us will be able to assist you. If you have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat box. And then Adam is going to introduce our speakers. So we'll have one speaker from 11 to 11:30. Then we'll have Minnesota Native Landscapes talk from 11:30 to 12. And then we'll have some tree planting tips and care from Dean Makey. And then we'll also have a little update on DNR programs and opportunities for landowners. And then at the end, again, we'll kind of have some opportunity for questions and answers. So thank you again for participating. And then just a plug for our photo contest. You can see this great picture from Jennifer Quam. If you are out and taking pictures of wildlife and native plants, we'd love to see your photos. Every year we do a photo contest trying to, again, get in more pictures that we can share with the community on some of the benefits of these native plants in our community. So did I miss anything from any of the other folks? If not, then I'm going to turn it over to Adam.
Sounds good. Thanks, Melissa. So our first speaker of the day is going to be Aaron Salto with Prairie Restorations. Prairie Restorations focuses a lot on native plants. They do a lot of projects such as rain gardens, native prairie plantings, shoreline restorations, things of that nature. And I'll let Aaron talk a little about why plant native vegetation.
All right. Thank you, Adam. So again, my name is Aaron Salto with Prairie Restorations. Been site manager for Princeton here for a few years. Been with the company for like 8-9 years now. So thank you everybody for having me. I appreciate the invite because we're all about kind of joining together and getting the word out there and trying to make people more aware of what they have on their property and what it can support. So basically, let's see here. I just need a slide there. Share this here. Okay. Can everybody see it?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, looks good.
There we go. Yeah, so my main focus and main goal today was why plant native vegetation. So I put a variety of topics on here for informational purposes, and if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask. So my first goal here was with native grasses and wildflowers, a lot of people don't understand that their root systems are so deep and they just create this dense mat underneath the soil surface, and they help hold soil in place. So that's very beneficial. Unlike turf grass, you're talking maybe a couple inches at most. Just it doesn't have the capabilities to support that soil like native grasses and flowers do. So, and then as far as for the benefits for wildlife, of course, it's going to be able to sustain a lot more wildlife. You got a variety of mammals, reptiles, birds, pollinators, bees, butterflies. So definitely a good home for the creatures. So, and then of course, in my opinion, there's a place for green grass, you know, your golf courses and well manicured lawns, but there's also a place to have this native vegetation. So it's aesthetically pleasing to the eye, in my opinion. Different blooming times throughout the year. It's something I always try to promote with any of my projects that you know, I kind of try to have something blooming throughout the year. So it's not just one main bulk, you know, during the summer, but try to have stuff in the spring, then your asters and your goldenrods during the fall. So, and also with the native grasses, kind of got a cool little look to it during the winter. Just looking out my window here in main office, the little blue stem, it's got a nice bronze color to it, unlike your invasive grasses such as smooth brome you see in road ditches that very pale looking, just doesn't, and it kind of folds down. So this, it helps with wildlife and critters during the winter months. So, and as well as so our main problem that I see in lakes is people complain about the algae blooms and stuff like that. So when you have a lot of runoff, people fertilize, all that is washing into these lakes and starting to become a serious problem in some areas, especially them really eutrophic lakes down the Southwest. So that's one important thing there too. I mean, that grass and native vegetation help trap that sediment, slow the rainfall down. Actually, it'll help infiltrate that water a lot better. So, and here's just a couple photos of course, there's always a place for rock, but it's definitely not, it's kind of like a temporary Band-Aid. It doesn't allow vegetation to grow. It supports almost zero habitat for wildlife. So just some quick benefits as I talked about the deep roots, definitely a lot better. Help hold that shoreline. Been seeing a lot of problems with ice heaving nowadays. And then, so the native vegetation is definitely going to help with that. Rock, the ice is going to keep pushing it. And I mean, ice pushes whatever it wants to, unfortunately. So, but with the native vegetation, them deep roots help hold that soil in place again. So it's very important. And then many more benefits after that. So as you can see in the picture underneath where I have the riprap here, so that's just kind of a native planting, just a variety of different sedges and rushes, different flowers too. It looks like there's some iris in there. So it's always something I try to incorporate. It's having a custom seed mix that's genetically, it's close to your area, your location. Try to never introduce something that's not native to that area. So, and then incorporate different plants to achieve more diversity. And again, it comes with trying to have something blooming throughout the year. And here's just a couple of pictures as well. Some of the more wetland plants, different varieties, swamp milkweed and blue vervain, Joe Pye weed, ironweed, some really nice ones. Some of the wetland flowers are actually some of the prettiest looking flowers too. So I know a lot of people enjoy that. So, and it goes with maintenance. I mean, you know, if eventually I'd personally like to have a cabin up north on a lake and retire, and that's my dream someday. And I'd rather not have to mow, you know, once a week, just sit back and relax and, you know, spend retirement not working so hard. So, and not having to irrigate, that's a benefit too. I mean, it's definitely, you know, upfront cost and commitment getting this started. And you definitely have to be patient with it. It's not just like turf grass, you know, it'll germinate in a couple days and then it's growing in 2-3 weeks. So this definitely is a process, 1 to 3 years. I mean, to really get fully established. So patience is definitely have to have a lot of patience for it. So, And this is just an example of kind of what some of the procedures we take. And then also there's a lot of do-it-yourselfers that can purchase these products and plants and do it yourself. So this is mainly just informational, just a design concept with the Coir-log. I don't know, can you see my mouse on this? Okay. So yeah, just an example of the Coir-log. This is helping deflect wave action, help with ice heaving and stuff like that. This is allowing all the plants down here to fully get established. Otherwise the waves would just knock into this and start loosening the soil. So different procedures wise, different styles of blanket. This is kind of a more heavier duty, help hold the soil in place and help hold moisture in as well to get them plants going. So, and this is actually the same property. This is probably 2-3 years later. I'm not exactly sure, but there's a lot of native vegetation. You can kind of see the Coir-log down here. It's all biodegradable products. So it slowly, settles into the shoreline. Again, the main goal of this Coir-log is to help get the vegetation going. And as you can see, a lot of diversity here. I mean, there's probably 15, 20 different species just looking at this right now, and I'm sure there's many more. So different, emergent plants such as arrowhead here. And then you have some of the shorter, drier plants up here. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. You get the wetland, and then especially up in the Brainerd area, it's very sandy in most spots. So you can have some of those shorter, drier species that are really pleasing to the eye, which is nice. Again, here's just another planting project. Just showing that these are the plugs, we call them. They come in 6-pack trays. So a lot of these species are not available from seed as much as other species. So these are really nice to try to incorporate into projects as well. And as you can see, I mean, it looks like there's a decent slope here. So it's, then a lot of trees. So not having to mow that would be very nice. And creating this buffer in between the water's edge and your manicured lawn is very important. And here's some more pictures of shoreline buffers. Again, even if you have a couple feet, I mean, that's definitely beneficial. We definitely like to have more than that. And 10 to 15 foot range at bare minimum definitely helps. And here's some of my favorites, the Liatris blazing star species. And the monarch butterflies, absolutely love them. Here's just some more examples. You can see the bees love them. And this is a prime example of having turf grass and manicured lawn up to the water's edge. The shore just gets beat up, and you can see the ice heave here. I mean, more than likely, if you had native vegetation here, this more than likely wouldn't happen. So this is just a site preparation spray, herbicide treatment, aquatic safe herbicide treatment. We always try to be as safe as we can for the environment and wildlife. So eventually this will turn into a nice shoreline restoration. And then open it up for any questions at this time. Any comments, anybody you'd like to add anything? I also have Josh Richardson. He's our head of sales here at Prairie Restorations. He's on this call as well. So if anybody has any questions for us or anybody has anything to add.
And welcome those of you who have just joined us.
I would just add, I planted some of the plants from our tree sale under my own yard. And one of the things I think is really cool is just the butterflies, especially the monarchs, like we've been able to go and collect our own monarchs. And I think the really cool thing I always think about is the Liatris, which is, it flowers more in the July, August. It has a pink flower, but the butterflies congregate there, and you'll see like 10, 15 butterflies all at one time, just kind of congregating, trying to find that food source. So I think it's just neat to just see that you don't have to have a huge area to plant that. And you can even do a small little spot in your own yard. And, you know, I don't see the butterflies in other people's yards because they don't have those plants.
Hi,
Yeah,
this
thanks.
is oh,
Oh,
this is
go ahead.
Josh. I would just agree. I would agree with you, Melissa. You know, I have a couple of really small plantings in my yard because I live in town, and the pollinators that I see, I do not. It's amazing. It's a magnet. So I think that's a big selling point, big important thing. You know, that any size project can have an impact on. So, thanks.
Yeah, if you have any questions, you can find your chat box in the bottom middle of your screen. If you click on chat, and you can type in your questions if you have any for Aaron or Josh. I did post the Prairie Restoration brochure in the chat box as well, so you can find that there. It's a very nice brochure, so please check that out. It's very, very nice. So, but thanks to Aaron.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. Those pictures were wonderful to see examples of shorelines. And for those of you who did just join us, I am recording the presentation, so we can get that to you at a later date too, if you missed the beginning.
Aaron, Jeff Laurel does have a question. He said, have you had success planting into Coir-logs?
That's actually something Josh might have a better answer to that one. That's personally something I've never actually been a part of, planting directly into them. We've always been on either side, usually on the back side of the Coir-logs, but Josh might be able to add something to that.
Yeah, I could comment on that. I think we have tried, you know, sometimes it's specified in a project to plant right into it. One thing I've noticed is that, you know, once the logs are in place and waves are washing up onto them, they fill up with a little bit of sediment and they get saturated, then they're a little more likely to support plant growth. But if you try to put them in right away, they tend to be pretty dry and lacking in nutrients. And so it depends on the project. If you have constant water levels that keep the logs saturated, is probably more likely to be able to plant into them. But you might want to wait even a few months before you put those plants in. But like Aaron mentioned, a lot of times planting right behind them is just as effective or more effective. But yeah, I think it's pretty project specific. So I don't know if anyone else wants to.
I guess I'd just say that, you know, you can do it. You're usually planting your plug that has some soil around it, and you just have to kind of manage the growing environment a little bit. They can and will grow into that, especially like Josh is saying, over time as the log starts to sediment in a little bit. So they can be used as like a growing medium, but you got to kind of pay attention to what's going on, or the plant can get washed out or dry out before it gets a chance to really get growing. So it is doable. You just got to pay attention to what's going on.
Hi, Joe. Thanks.
Hey, Josh. Yeah.
All right. Anybody else have any questions for Aaron? Alrighty, if you think of questions later on, just feel free to post them in the chat box. We can try to answer them, or Aaron will be also seeing the comments, so you can comment it as well. So I think we'll.
Oh, sorry. Well, thank you everybody for the time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Aaron.
Adam, do you want to put in the chat box too, the contact for Aaron and maybe the Prairie Restoration website, so people want to contact him, they can do that as well?
Absolutely. I will do that. So I'll get that in the chat box. I'm going to re-share my screen and we'll get on to the next speaker. So for people that are new, that joined on a little later, this is kind of what our agenda looks like. We started with Aaron, and then we're going to move on to Minnesota Native Landscapes. So Minnesota Native Landscapes is somebody that we've worked with. They do everything from native plants to helping people with projects that deal with native plants, whether it's rain gardens, prairie plantings, things like that. They've also been getting into grazing, different grazing things, especially for invasive species. So they've been using goats to graze invasive buckthorn. So Joe Schaefer with Minnesota Landscapes will be talking about that, about their grazing program, and they really try to promote grazing to manage native systems. So you'll be talking about managing invasives using goats. So I'll unshare, and if you want to share, Joe, that'd be great.
All right. Let's see what I can do here. Bear with me here. I can find it again. Okay. I gotta go backwards quick. Sorry about that. There you go. Flash. Quick look at the presentation. Okay. Oh, yeah. How about now? Can you hear me now? You can hear me now? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Joe.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Computer screens and technology are not my forte. So I'm here now, and I think we'll have everything clicking along. But good morning, everybody. My name is Joe Schaefer from Minnesota Native Landscapes, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about grazing, and specifically today we're going to talk about goat grazing for brush control. It's kind of the main focus of that hinges around a project that we did in the Crow Wing County Watershed District. But I just wanted to talk a little bit back about Aaron's presentation and what Josh had to say and what Melissa had to say about you make these little refuges for these little critters, and it can be just insects or it can be the small mammals or birds or whatever else it might be. And I have a big yard and a big prairie, but I still, you know, it's still small on the grand scheme of things with the landscape, and it's no different than a little rain garden or a little shoreline thing. And when I'm out there and you walk around and you notice all the things that live out there, there's so many things for people that might be on the call here today that haven't experienced this. There's so many things that live out there that my thought always is if I didn't have this prairie growing here right now, where would all of these things exist in the world? And that's the mind-boggling thing about the whole thing. I have a prairie that I'm pretty proud of. It's whatever, 3, 4, 5 acres, and there's just so much stuff growing out there, living out there, that I don't know where in the heck it would be if those places weren't provided. So anyway, the things that those native plant communities, especially little prairies and flowers, diverse plant communities can provide is super beneficial to our biological systems and biodiversity and everything, of course. But anyway, I'm going to talk a little bit about using grazing animals today. And I would just say, I'll just start off by saying that, as we'll kind of get into a little bit farther down in the presentation, is that grazing animals have been around forever and have been managing plant community dynamics forever. And now humans are kind of in the business of trying to orchestrate all of that. And the whole concept of it is very basic, but when we're dealing with prescriptive things, dealing with invasives and really dynamic plant communities, we do have a lot to learn and a long ways to go on, you know, how to roll it out exactly and specifically to attain the desired results. And so as exciting and fun as grazing is, which it is fun, it's one of the most fun things to do at work at this company, is to run around with these animals and just see how they are interacting out there and the work they do and how hard they work and all of that. But it's just a fun thing, and it's it needs to be done properly, and it's rarely like a one-stop shop or one application to solve all sorts of vegetation management needs with grazing, but it definitely, in our opinion, has a role. So anyway, we're talking about managing invasives in Minnesota, and invasives are a wide variety. When we're talking about plants, wide variety of trees, shrubs, invasive, herbaceous plants, and everything. And by the nature of their definition, they're things that are brought into a different area that aren't wanting to be growing there. And so when we bring things and plants are introduced to different growing environments, they often don't have natural competitors, and they mess with the plant community dynamics. And so we try to manage that, and typically it's using chemicals or mechanical means, things that are a lot less natural and maybe not as effective. And so we just are looking at it like there's a better way to combat this problem, and that's trying to put the grazing ungulates back on the landscape and have a more biological control for these invasive species. Grazing ungulates have managed grasslands and other plant communities for as long as we've had grass and soil on this continent, pretty much. And bison, deer, and elk are all native grazers to Minnesota, along with some of the other ones, the sheep probably, and goats, but to a certain extent, but caribou, all these things. And of course, when humans came and took over this continent, all these things were removed, and the addition of the invasive plants have led to kind of an unbalanced, unhealthy system that's all out of whack. And so when we're dealing with things, or when we're dealing with these grazing animals, they control both the brushy, like woody material, and just the herbaceous plants of the invasive species. So we use, we call it biological brush management, which is reducing or removing plants that are invasive and noxious by using ruminant browsing species that eat the actively growing parts of the plants, trample the plants, and strip the bark to also create the girdling effect. And at the same time, we're feeding animals that are part of the agricultural and food production system of this continent. And so we're kind of accomplishing two things at the same time there. Grazing goats in specific, they're like deer and elk, and they graze and browse, which means they like to eat the young, fresh, woody parts of the plant as much as they do the leafy parts. And so they can have a negative effect on the plants if the grazing pressure is applied thoroughly and timely enough. And it's interesting to note that goats originally came from the same regions of the world as our buckthorn friends did. So, there's probably a relationship there naturally, just not on this continent. So while we don't have the native goats running around in enough quantities to control the buckthorn, maybe we can have some controlled populations of non-native goats do the heavy work. When we graze goats or any other animals, of course we have to contain them, and because they'll follow the food, they know where the good stuff is, and they'll eat an area out, and they'll try and move on, of course. So they have to be fenced in, and we're always developing and improving our containment practices, and have all sorts of cool ideas there. But anyway, for now, it's electric net fences for the most part for the goats that are electrified by usually a little solar panel. And of course, they need water, and they're always accompanied by a water tank and a water trough. And they also sometimes will get supplemental energy supplements depending on the type of grazing that we're trying to do with them and the goals of the goals of the deployment and what the browse or forage that they're eating will provide to them. So we just kind of keep an eye on that and add supplemental nutrition if needed. It's always an interesting balancing act to try and accomplish the grazing goals and maintain a healthy animal population. And so walk the fine line between making sure that they're really hungry and well fed all at the same time. So and check them daily or very regularly to maintain welfare standards, of course. So this summer we got the chance to graze at the Rotary Park in Brainerd, and so we had 3 sites there along the river that were identified as having had buckthorn physically removed in the past, and we had some regeneration of the buckthorn that was kind of primo goat browse. And so this September we had a number of goats out there for a couple of weeks taking care of business. And you can see, well, here, I'm going to play this little video first. Hopefully this works.
The Brainerd Rotary Club is utilizing goats to try to control the invasive buckthorn that grows throughout the Rotary Riverside Park in Brainerd. In an effort to maintain the park, the Crow-Wing Soil and Water Conservation District partnered with the Brainerd Parks Department to use the goats to graze certain areas that will allow for other plant species. Reducing the buckthorn will also help provide a better habitat for wildlife and help bring the park back to its natural state.
In the park, we're trying to create this environment as it would have been 100 or 200 years ago. And part of that, we need to eliminate the invasive species. And so this has been a project that started about 4 years ago, and it'll be continuing on for years into the future.
The buckthorn really puts a damper on the wildlife habitat, so it would reduce, the birding opportunities, and it just grows so thick that it makes it hard for deer and stuff to walk through. So it's just really tough when you have a whole forest full of it. So to try to reduce that to kind of make it as wildlife friendly as possible, and in turn make it kind of as recreationally functional as possible.
The goats are contracted through Minnesota Native Landscapes to reduce the amount of herbicide used to control the buckthorn.
Lakeland News is member-supported content. Please consider supporting Lakeland News today.
Now the trick of how do you shut off YouTube?
That was a great video, though.
Let me see if I can do this without getting rid of me altogether. Anybody got any tips on how to go back?
I would just close your web browser
Right here. Okay.
and then go back to your.
There you go.
Now I open it up
You
again.
might have
again.
to, and then just go to your slide that you were on.
And I gotta go like.
Yeah, you should be able to scroll down even. Oh, there you go.
Here.
It was amazing in Brainerd how many people went to look at those goats, and that was a pretty big story. People were really curious.
How do we get my show to be the full screen again?
Probably go to slideshow.
There we go.
There you go.
Got it. Okay. So you can see in this picture here, there's a lot of excitement in the foreground here with the grasses and stuff. But if you look in the background at the buckthorn regeneration that's back there by the pickup truck, you can kind of get an idea of the impacts on the buckthorn itself. But anyway, they were in there and they moved them from paddock to paddock over a couple week time period. There was about 100 goats there. The goals are to defoliate the buckthorn and mow down the other stuff. And the real goal is to kind of release and hopefully encourage the red maples, winterberry, nannyberry, gray dogwood, and other things to grow that would naturally occur along the Mississippi River corridor there. And our our number one fight song for using these grazing animals is just kind of congruent with our company's goals of trying to reduce or possibly eliminate the use of herbicides for native plant community vegetation as we go forward, and just trying to figure out that dynamic. So we're, you know, we just like being able to use that time control instead of using chemicals. On this project, like I said, we started with 30 in the one paddock and ended up adding some more for pressure, and they were in there for about, they were in each paddock for about 5 to 7 days. And the key is kind of hidden behind, I don't know what you guys are seeing, but it's the key to the whole thing with the grazing, in our opinion, or whatever that has to be pointed out, is that just because we went there and grazed some leaves off some buckthorn plants and some of the fresh shoots doesn't mean that there's never going to be buckthorn at the Rotary Park again in Brainerd. And what I mean by that is the grazing program efficacy is dependent on a scheduled and repeat grazing pressure at certain times to accomplish the goals. And it's not just over just because we grazed there for 1 week. So again, goats will defoliate everything, and that opens things up for the plants that belong there, and it just allows for the native species of plants, and then hopefully the rest of the things that come along with it, whether it's the microbiologicals or the insects or mammals and birds and just other wildlife. So you know, again, things are just naturally kind of managed this way, but we've removed this grazing component so dramatically from the landscape that there needs to be like a conscientious effort put back into this to maintain the systems that we're trying to achieve. People don't realize it, but in our climate here in Minnesota, or at least our historical climate here in Minnesota, plant communities that are left to their own devices will almost always turn back into trees and brush. And so specifically when we have these grazing opportunities to maintain different and diverse plant communities like grasslands or savannas, there needs to be some kind of regular disturbance to accomplish that, so they don't just turn back into box elder and buckthorn and everything else. That's about it. M&L is a leader in ecological restoration management. Like I said, this grazing thing is just one of our tools. And the best part about it, or the bonus, is just while we're trying to use this effective tool to manage these plant community dynamics that are so essential, we're also producing what we consider to be some of the best meat on the planet. And we have a goal here at our company to positively impact 10 million acres by the year 2030. And this management objective here, or component, is a huge part of that. And we have some very ambitious goals as far as the agricultural system that exists in this country, that was developed because we figured out how to build a tractor. And we think that the country has a lot of ground to make up, and just look closer at how we can do things, thinking like what we know in the 22nd century as opposed to the 19th, or however that goes. But anyway, if you have any questions or whatever, feel free to reach out to me, and I'm glad to let you know what we think we know.
Thank you, Joe. That was really informational. Appreciate it. I know there is a question from Jeff Laurel. How do goats fare versus predators like coyotes? I'm assuming he means, has that been a problem?
Yep, it's a great question. And we've been grazing in some very predator populated areas, even wolves and bears, and we do run livestock guard animals, usually like little donkeys and stuff, that are actually kind of effective at keeping things away. Little donkeys more aggressive than most people would realize. But anyway, you know, usually also in the goat sets, they're surrounded by an electrified netting fence, and so that tends to keep things away too. But you know, there's all, and then there's also the management component of it, where there's usually people around when we have these sets. We're usually checking on them every day. And, you know, as we all know, that kind of helps with the predator control too. They don't like to be around so much human activity. So it's really been a non-issue for us so far. And if managed properly, you can pull it off. We had them at Sherburne National Wildlife Refuge, which has a resident wolf pack, and we sat out there for months and months and months. And as far as I can recall, we didn't have any predation issues even there. So
That's good to hear. There's another question from Tana. I live in town, but have areas with a lot of buckthorn, and we raise bees. Any suggestions on how to get rid of the buckthorn?
well, it depends on the scale and the magnitude of the situation as how I would answer that question. But, you know, just tenacity is the real answer to that. And, you know, cut them down. If you're into chemicals, treat the stumps. Be aggressive with the resprouting and the regeneration, the young plants, and just stay after it. You know, I mean, obviously grazing can be a component of it even in town. I don't know if that was the nature of the question there, but we can take these goats and put them on very small setups. They're in backyards all the time, taking care of buckthorn problems. And to be honest with you, it's kind of fun in that situation because it's like an active management story that people get to share with their neighbors and kids, and have these cute little animals running all over the place. So, but yeah.
Joe, do you know if people still, I know for a while people used like the bags, you know, you cut down the tree and then you put the bag over the stump, you know, to kill it and things like that.
It can be done. And that's why I said it just kind of depends on the magnitude of your situation there. You know, you can do that in a small plot in your backyard, and certainly, yeah, you know.
Yeah, and I was just thinking then they could treat it with the chemicals and put some kind of cover over it if they're worried about the bees touching the chemicals, or maybe that's an idea.
Yeah, I mean, just cutting off the critical life sources to plant life, sun and water, and oxygen or whatever, you know, CO2, carbon monoxide, carbon dioxide, whatever. But you just,
yeah,
you know, just suppress the living heck out of everything.
And so there are a couple more questions. Do you have a wait list for setting up a goat grazing project? And then where could we rent goats? The other one.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you can get them from us. There's other vendors in the state too. And yeah, just contact me and I'll put you in touch with our grazing department and get you on the list if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, maybe we'll put your info in the chat box too, Joe. And like you mentioned, I know in our office, the Soil and Water District, we've talked about partnering with some of the local 4-H, you know, groups that have goats too, and getting the kids involved and making it educational for them. I just don't know if that's happened yet.
Yeah, and I mean, we're, you know, the reality of it is the meat that's produced from these workers, we can expand the concept like 100-fold, and we're still going to have a hard time having even a recognizable impact on the food production system. So there's just our approach at the company is to have collaboration with other producers and make this happen on a scale that's recognizable on the agricultural system. That's like the real goal, because why not? We have forage that the sun's creating. Let's put it in something's belly rather than a corn stalk or a corn.
Yeah, I'm curious. Yeah, where do these goats come from? Do you use, you know, local ones from the area where the project is, or do you usually just truck in from?
Our involvement with our goat program has only been our own assets to this point, but on our sheep front, we do a lot of collaboration with other sheep growers and sheep producers, that is, around the state. So
very interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, perfect. Any other questions for Joe?
Yeah, we'll just make sure to get, there's your email right there.
Yep, and we'll post all your contact information in the chat box. Reminder for new people that maybe have joined, if you'd like to ask a question, you can go to the bottom center of your screen. There should be a chat box feature. If you click that, you can certainly type in your questions for our speakers. Joe, I have one other question. What's the height of buckthorn where goats don't become effective anymore? Whereas then you'd have to cut it down.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's pretty tall is the answer, like taller than you'd think. The bigger the plant is, of course, especially in the case of a tree, the more energy reserves they have. And so you can take all the leaves off a bigger tree and, it's going to have a lot better chance of surviving than a small tree. But as far as what they'll eat, they actually will tackle the trees. So like you can have, as long as you have a stem that's pliable enough for a 100-pound goat to tackle it, they'll push them right over, and the rest of them just come like the feed wagon just pulled up. It's insane. Like they just whoosh, you can hear the tree go down and whoosh. So they're as long as the stem is like less than, I don't know, kind of like an inch in diameter at knee height, they can get really aggressive on those plants. So the tree can be like 12 feet tall or whatever, and they'll knock it down and mow it down. But typically we're targeting like waist high kind of re-sprouts, and that's the most effective thing from, shoulder height and down is kind of the sweet spot. But it is amazing to see them tackle a big tree. And then what happens once the thing's on the ground? It's pretty funny.
Sure. So we had 2 more questions. This one's from Josh. Have you considered grazing grassland sites with bison?
Yeah, absolutely. We have a fairly large bison herd that we're kind of grooming for that topic right there. And we're just kind of in talks with and hunting around for the right opportunities and situating the bison herd to be amenable to that. But absolutely, and it can and should and will be done. It is being done in other states, of course, but it's a little bit different dynamic because you have an animal that is, of course, not as easy to manage as a sheep. And so if you want to use bison to manage plant communities, there are different mentalities that will apply, management practices and whatnot. But yeah, the answer is absolutely yes. That's what we're really grooming our entire grazing program to be. The pinnacle is to be having bison be a fluent part of vegetation management on the Great Plains states.
Well, perfect. All right, let's move on. Joe, if you want to unshare your screen, we'll move on to Dean.
And maybe anybody can answer. Kim asked, did you do the gopher infestation?
I'm not, no.
Okay, she asked, how can you stop gopher infestation?
I guess I can chime in on that too.
Sure.
Down in this area, and Joe can attest to this too, I'm sure, gophers can be a major problem. They're part of the native landscape in a way, but they do disturb a lot of soil, of course, so it's kind of a hard thing to manage. But again, going back to my presentation, with the deep roots of native plants, gophers do have a hard time navigating through a system like that. So, I mean, gophers, they're always going to be a part of the landscape. You might have a few here and there, but eventually over time, when those roots get fully established, kind of create into a dense mat, they have a hard time navigating. So that is one way to combat that. But of course, I guess trapping too is another one, obvious one. So
I have another answer to that I've been working on. Introduce prairie dogs.
Yeah. Have you done that is the question, right?
I'm not sure it's ecologically appropriate or legal. So,
yeah,
no.
exactly.
But I look at those maps and I'm like, I don't know, that range is kind of over here. We should try this, but no, haven't tried it yet.
All righty.
And sorry, Adam, I'm just going to interject. If any of the attendees, if you know how to, please, in the chat, you can directly send to Crowing SWCD your email address. And then we can make sure to send you some of this information, where to get the recording, as well as for sure the discount code to make sure that you get it in case you leave the meeting or anything like that. You don't have to share it with everyone. You can, in the chat box, just do a drop down and share it just with Growing SWCD, or any of our staff is fine.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Joe, for all your help answering questions and your speeches. We're going to move on to Dean. So Dean, if you want to pull up your presentation for everyone. So Dean Mackey, yeah, perfect. Dean Mackey is a retired forester with the DNR, and he helps our office do a lot of forest stewardship plans, things of that nature. So he's still very active in the tree world, and he's going to be presenting on tree planting tips and tree care.
Yes, hello everyone. I am Dean Mackey. I was asked by Clayton of the SWCD to give a talk at the open house today, and I said sure. So then I started thinking. It didn't take me too long to think of a topic that I thought I could talk about. I know the kind of stock that is being offered at the tree sale here. So over my years as a forester, I've worked with planting tree seedlings a lot. I started as a forester back in 1980, and my first years I worked with Crow Wing County Land Department and helped manage tax forfeited land, and we did a lot of tree planting of acres of tax forfeited land. I first started kind of running locally hired workers, planting crews of local people, and I supervised and ran those crews, and we planted a lot of trees that way. Then after a few years, we kind of switched from locally hired crews to contract crews, companies that the county contracted with, and I would supervise those contracts. So there was like about 6 or so years that I worked planting trees on the county lands. And then I transferred over to the DNR office, and for the rest of my career, I was a private forest management forester. So I helped a lot of private landowners planting trees on their own lands, hundreds of acres, thousands and thousands of trees. And now, as I'm retired from the DNR, I do private forestry consulting still, and I have a couple landowners in the works now to do some planting in the next couple of years. So I still am working with private landowners, and I help with our school forest management in Brainerd here. And I have the students do some tree planting on the school forest land. So I kind of thought over the years, I've developed some ideas of the way I like to do the tree plantings and little tricks of the trade, I guess you could say, of how to plant trees. So in my talk today, I kind of like to cover these 4 areas: site preparation, planting stock, planting methods, and tree care and maintenance. So let's start with site preparation. I kind of think of planting trees as kind of like a farmer planting a crop. They prepare their field before seedings, and you should really think about site preparation for tree planting too. And the main 2 reasons I feel site preparation is needed is to help control some of the vegetative competition that might be there, and then also to kind of clean up the site and make it easy for the tree planters to work in. And I would say we have kind of 2 situations where we have artificial tree planting done. One I call reforestation, and this is kind of planting trees in an area that has been disturbed, maybe from logging or a windstorm or maybe wildfire. That would be reforestation, where you're reforesting the area. And the idea of the site prep for reforestation would be to expose the soil by removing some of the woody debris. And you can use heavy equipment like a disc trencher, patch scarifier, or you can maybe do it with hand tools, scarifying a small spot to where the treeling is going to be planted. A second situation where maybe you might do site preparation would be for the purpose of afforestation, which is tree planting to convert land into a forest situation. And this might be like planting an open field. And your site preparation in that afforestation situation would be to remove heavy grasses that might compete with the trees, and you can do that by chemical or mechanical means. So here's a picture of a disc trencher. This site was logged, and at the far left there you can see a big pile of slash. So a lot of the slash was removed from the site and put into this big pile, but there's other woody debris that was still left out there, and they had grass and shrub cover. So this big machine, the disc trenching attachment is pulled along by this big logging skidder, and these big discs turn and they make a nice row of soil exposed there, and it kind of throws the woody debris off to the side so that tree planters can just walk down that trench there and plant their trees in a good situation. So that's one type of site preparation. They have machines that are more patch scarifiers. Instead of a continuous row, they just scalp like a 3 or 4 foot long patch every so often at the spacing you want. So that would be a patch scarifier. So the scarification exposes the soil and kind of throws away any woody debris that might be in the way. Here's another situation of some mechanical site prep. Is at the school forest we have a lot of brushy area, and we have a big brush mower come in and mow all that brush down and chop it up, and makes a pretty easy site for the students to plant trees in. So that's some mechanical site preparation. You can use chemicals to do vegetation control also. So your site preparation could be mechanical or chemical, or maybe a combination of the two. So once you have the site prepared, you're ready to plant. And I first thought I'd talk about the planting stock, and I believe the district offers the bare-rooted seedlings and some containerized plugs. And this is planting stock that's produced by nurseries, mainly for the conservation type plantings, which are kind of large acreage areas. Maybe you have small areas too, such as a shelter belt or a field windbreak, but a lot of the plantings produced by these tree nurseries are for doing large conservation planting. So the seedlings that they produce are small in size. They're maybe like 2, 3, 4-year-old seedlings. So they're not very big. They're small in size, and that makes them maybe easier to plant and also less expensive. You know, if you were to go to a landscape nursery and buy potted stock, you'd be spending a lot of money. So the bare-root and containerized seedlings are not so expensive, but they're also another factor is they're also perishable. So it's like maybe a food product you buy in a store. You have to take care of them. You have to store them so that they are in good shape but still when you're planting them. So that means from the time you pick them up at a nursery or from some location like this SWCD sells, from the time you pick them up to the time they actually are put in a hole in the ground, you have to really take care of them, especially the bare-rooted seedlings. They don't have any dirt around their roots, so if they're out in the open and exposed, they can dry out easily. And if you let them dry out too much, it's almost like planting a dead seedling, even though there might be green still on the top. If those roots dry out too much, that's not good. So you want to take care of this stock. Okay, here's a slide that shows the bare-rooted seedlings. You can see on the left there, he's holding maybe a 2-year-old seedling, it looks like, and the dirt is removed from the seedlings as they're lifted in the nursery. So they're packaged like this into bulk containers. Here looks like some hardwood species or maybe some shrubs. and a bunch of them that they've lifted from the nursery beds, and then they've been packaged by covering the root area with a big plastic bag. So as they leave the nursery, they should be in good shape. I know the DNR nursery miss the roots a little bit, so they're moist. So as you get them home and are putting them in storage until you can plant them, you want to keep them cool. And I would say not to open them, avoid them, those roots from drying out. Maybe you want to open it and check and see how they are. And if they look dry, you can mist them a little bit to keep them moist. I've heard do not put them in a pail of water though. That washes some of the real small soil particles and that off the roots, which is not good. So just keep them moist by misting them if you feel they're dry. So that's bare root stock. And here's a kind of a bad picture, but shows containerized seedlings. They're grown in maybe more of a greenhouse situation oftentimes. Each bunch of seedlings is grown in a block with small holes in them. And this container can be plastic or styrofoam, but it will hold a whole bunch of seedlings, maybe 50, maybe 100 in a block, kind of depending on the size of the seedling you have. These plugs are different sizes, growing different sizes of the top of the tree too. So that's would be a containerized seedling. So they're probably a little more safe to have out in the open because there is some dirt around them, but you certainly wouldn't want to leave these sitting out in the sun for half an hour. That's going to dry them out, and that would not be good for them. So that's an example of the containerized seedlings. So as you can see, the seedlings are small. They're small, maybe from a half a foot of height or top on them to maybe a couple feet. If you had 4-year-old seedlings or so, you could have a couple feet of top, and the root area could be just a few inches, 5 inches or so in length, to maybe some longer ones, 6 inches or so. But in general, really small seedlings, making them less expensive, and also a smaller seedling, I think, is easier to plant. So the planting methods that I've been involved with over the years has mainly been either machine tree planting or hand planting. Machine planting, here's some contractors. You generally have kind of a 2-person operation. 1 person drives a tractor pulling a tree planting machine. On the tree planting machine, there are some parts here that are important to know about. It's nice if the hydraulics can hook up to the tractor, so as you lift the machine in and out of the ground, you can use the tractor hydraulics. Some machines have hand pumps if you don't have the tractor hydraulics. Right in this area here is a coulter wheel that kind of digs a slit in the ground, makes a slit in the ground, which is followed up by a little shoe that creates a trench. So those are the first parts in the ground. On the sides are scalping attachments, and then at the back is a cab where the person planting the trees sits, and then followed up by some packing tires. So it is a machine, very mechanical. It breaks down. You have to be almost kind of a farmer type to know how to fix equipment like this out in the field. And so it is a machine, very mechanical. It sometimes works really well and sometimes it doesn't work so well. Some factors in that are this machine is kind of gravity fed into the ground as it's pulled by the tractor, and there are things that can keep it out of the ground, maybe some hard soils like a hard pan in the old field, or rocks, things like that that'll bring the machine out of the ground as it hits those things, and that can pose problems. Some other drawbacks of the machine are that where the tree planter person puts the seedlings into the trench, you can buy too big a stock. It has a too big a root system, and it makes it hard to get that seedling through the shoe into the trench. Maybe you buy too small a trees and they kind of get swallowed up down in the hole. That's one thing to look out for. I mentioned the hard soil and the rocks. There's some people that believe that this is a nice trench for pocket gophers to follow. So some people don't like the machine plantings, but because they believe pocket gophers are attracted to that nice trench to go down, and then they'll eat the roots of the trees and kill them. So those are maybe some drawbacks, but if you have a nice site, free of rocks, good sandy soil, you can plant a lot of trees and they can get planted very well. The machine, if it's working good, making a good trench and packing them good, you can plant a lot of trees in a short amount of time. So that's machine planting. The other method of planting seedlings is by hand, using hand tools, and just making holes. I shouldn't say holes, they're more of a slit in the ground. You're not digging a hole with these kind of tools, these planting bars. You're just making a slit where the seedling is put into the ground. So these are 5th grade students. They get a little instruction how to do the tree planting that I give them, but they're able to plant. I give them about 10 seedlings, and in a half an hour, these 5th grade students can plant trees by hand. Let's look at some tools that are used for hand planting. The most common one would be this one on the right. I call it a tree planting bar. This one on the far left is kind of used by a lot of the contract crews. It's called a hodad. This is kind of like this one on the right, another tree planting bar. And this is more of a spade, I would say, for a big root system. You make a big slit in the ground. So these are some planting tools. How do you carry your tree seedlings around the site? There are tree planting bags. Here's a single bag that you just wrap around your waist. A lot of the contracting crews have big double bags with harnesses so they can carry, a couple hundred seedlings maybe at a time. I would say a common one used by landowners around here is a bucket. I would say just put enough seedlings in that bucket to plant in half an hour. Again, you want to protect those roots from drying out. So not putting a lot of them in there at a time, just put a small amount that you can plant in half an hour and carry that bucket around. You might even want to keep the roots moist by covering the roots somehow with wet moss or wet towels or wet burlap or something. Do anything you can to help keep those roots from drying out. That's very important. Can't say that enough. Here's kind of the little process for planting a seedling using a tree planting bar. These students have got their bag of trees, 10 tree seedlings or so. I have them hold them in a plastic bag covering the roots and only taking this one seedling out at a time. After this guy has made his hole, this guy can take one seedling out of the bag. Here's some students. I tell them to look for soil to plant in, not out in the woody debris, but try and find an exposed soil spot. If they have to plant it in a woody debris area or leaves and twigs and that, they can use their feet to kind of brush all that away so they get down to the soil. You can't plant it in the material there, it won't live. You got to get your roots down in the dirt. Some of these kids are pretty lightweight. They have a hard time making that slit in the ground. And they can, on a site like this, you'll have a lot of roots that you may have to break through, maybe some rocks you hit. And if they can't get it in the ground, I help them, or I tell them, well, move over a little bit, try and find a different spot. So making a hole for the younger kids is a little difficult at times. So here, these students did a little bit of a scraping away of debris here, and they have their ceiling down in the hole. You can see a ceiling she's showing here. I think I just had them pose with a ceiling. She shouldn't really have that out of the bag while they're planting. They just need one in the hole, but you can see the bare roots. So make sure the roots are all spread out and they're pointed downward like roots grow. You shouldn't have them all twisted up or in a ball or the roots turning up. They should be pointing downward and well spread. And then planted at the right depth. So they should be planted the same depth they were at the nursery. So you'll see kind of a root collar area where it changes from top to roots, at least have them that deep into the hole. You don't want any roots exposed above the ground level. Have all the roots down in the hole, and actually almost like she has it here, a little deeper than too shallow. So they have their ceiling placed in the soil at the right depth, the roots all spaced out and pointing down. And now it's time to close up the hole. And this is really important part, that you gotta get the soil packed really tightly around the roots of that ceiling. They didn't do a very good job of clearing out the leaves and things from around there, but a little technique with a tree planting bar now is, after you've made your initial hole and put the ceiling in there, you come back a couple, 2-3 inches from the first hole, and you put that bar in the ground again, all the way, so that that blade part is down to the foot peg. Then you want to pull back the top of the bar towards you, and that forces the hole to close up in the bottom. And then you push the bar forward. So there's kind of a two motions there. You pull the bar back first to close up the bottom of the hole, and then you push the bar forward, and that closes up the top of the hole. So that should pack the dirt pretty well around that ceiling. After you've done that, you want to heel in all around that tree. Pack it as much as you can with your feet. The heel of your foot, really pound it in good. And be careful not to bend the ceiling, but that's very important. You don't want to have any air pockets around that root system, and that it's packed really well. And then you'll have kind of the second slit that you put in the ground. Try and close that up too. So everything is really tight all around the bottom of that ceiling, and no air pockets for the roots to dry out. So these 5th graders finish this site. You can see all the little seedlings out there that they planted. It's not a bad idea. I usually kind of walk around and check almost all of them to make sure they're planted well. And even these 5th graders and their plantings have had really good success over the years. Landowners have maybe a little more equipment around. This man here I've worked with, he's planted a lot of trees over the years. He likes to plant big stock, transplant stock. So it's got big root systems. So he's got this equipment where he can auger a hole in the ground like he's doing here. And then he follows up and he does, a few drilled holes, and then he'll plant his trees in them. And really nice. This is kind of ideal planting. You got a big hole to put those roots in, a lot of nice dirt to fill in around the roots. So if you have that type of equipment and want to plant big stock, that's kind of a nice way to do it. And I've seen planting contractors use kind of like an ice auger so it has the power head, but instead of an ice bit, there's soil auger bits. So that would be another way to drill holes. I kind of looked on the internet, there's a nice YouTube video. Maybe you want to jot this name down. I don't know if I'll have time to show this here today, but this shows pretty well how to plant a seedling using that hand planting bar like the students were doing. So if you have a chance, you might want to look at that video. It's only a couple minutes in length, but pretty good. Okay, so you have all your trees planted. You don't just give up now or stop work with them now. There's a lot of tree care you need to do after they've been planted. Mulching is one thing I would say is not done too often in large scale reforestation projects. We kind of rely on nature to give the precipitation needed, but mulching could be done with plantings of a smaller scale. Some mulching materials might be wood chips or straw, grass clippings. There's even some manufactured mulch mats, but your mulch, whatever mulch material, has to allow the moisture to seep through down into the roots. But the mulching will help preserve moisture and also might help control competing vegetation, some like grasses. Once in a while, things get dry. At the school forest, I've had the kids do some watering of trees. Like they planted trees early in the spring and we had the 2 or 3 weeks of no rain. So I had a lot of labor force there. So I would bring out a big tank of water and they'd fill up their jugs with water and water the seedlings. Usually in a big reforestation project, you won't do watering. You're pretty much relying on nature. And some years, these little seedlings, you have drought years and a lot of them will die, but hopefully normal precipitation during the summer, they should live. One thing that might happen to you in a forested woodland situation is after we've brush hogged the site to make it easy for planting, that brush grows back. Maybe we want to bring the goats in. No, I don't know if that would work because they'd probably end up eating your seedlings, but there's mechanical and chemical ways of controlling the brush around the seedlings. Here I have the kids using lopping shears to come and cut the brush from around the ceiling so it opens it up. And we have to do that annually. So you might have 5 or 6 years of brush cutting until that tree grows above the brush, kind of like maybe one back here. Then you don't have to do that release work anymore. Some other problems that you might have in your tree planting is insects and diseases. One of the diseases that is quite common is white pine blister rust. That affects the white pine trees, and you can do some preventative work to help avoiding that tree disease. An insect example would be the spruce sawfly. That is a defoliating insect, little caterpillars that come and eat the needles off the spruce of kind of young and open grown. So lots of insects and diseases that can affect your trees. Heavy snows, the last few winters, couple winters especially, we've had early wet heavy snows that will make the tree seedling bend over. I've seen where this thing is bent all the way down into the snow, and if I'm lucky, I might have some warm weather where the snow melts and the tree is a little flexible. I try and straighten those up, but I kind of feel like if that seedling is stuck with its head in the snow all winter long, I don't know if it's going to recover from that very well. So there's another nature problem, heavy snows. Someone mentioned pocket gophers earlier today. They can get into your fields and eat the roots off the trees and kill them. Mice, voles, and rabbits will nibble on the bark of the bases of the trees, and they can girdle it and kill the tree. we have a lot of deer browsing around our Brainerd area here. They will browse during the winter time on trees, conifer trees, even hardwoods and shrubs. And you can do some different things to help protect the seedling from the deer browsing. Here's a bud cap that's applied with staples, and we kind of target the terminal bud of the tree, the top bud, so that if that is protected from the deer eating it, it can grow out of the reach of the deer. They'll probably browse maybe on the side branches, but if you can protect that top terminal bud so it can grow every year and then finally get out of the reach of the deer, you can quit the bud capping. So bud capping is kind of inexpensive and not too hard to do. That's one method. The method I really like are these tree shelters. This is a plastic net cylinder here that's held on the tree by a bamboo stake or some kind of other stake. But again, you're protecting mainly the top bud of the tree. I think this works better than bud caps. From my experiences, it is quite spendy and a little more spendy. You have to buy these materials and you have to maintain these for quite a few years until that tree grows out of the reach of the deer. But this, if you can get these installed properly, and every year you have to adjust them with as the tree grows in height, it's a pretty labor intensive, but I feel this tree shelter works pretty good. Another method would be chemical repellents. They're used, I would say, when I was working on state land, they're used in combination, maybe with a bud capping. You do bud capping and repellent application. So a combination of chemical and some materials might be the way to go too. But we have quite a bit of deer browsing problem, I would say, around the Brainerd area. Hardwoods and shrubs need a different kind of protection tube. You can see there's on this one, these are on some birch or some kind of fruit trees maybe here, looks like. But over the years, these hard-sided tubes have changed. And I think now the recommendation is to have some kind of ventilation in the tube. Like here you can see part of it has these slits in it to allow air movement. And then you need a pretty sturdy stake and maybe pretty tall, 5 feet or so, it looks like these are, because you're gonna have these tubes on these hardwoods and shrubs for many years, a few years after the tree grows out of the top of the tube. And the reason is that it needs a lot of time for that tree to kind of harden up. The ventilation helps for that, but also having that tube around the tree until it gets really, really firm, and then you can take the tube off of the seedling. So this is kind of the recommendation for the type of tube on hardwoods and shrubs. So in conclusion here, there's kind of quite a few steps in establishing trees and shrubs. Prepare the site before planting. Choose a tree species that's appropriate to your site, both for the soils you have and maybe the sunlight conditions you have. Select the proper size of stock for the method of planting. Smaller seedlings are easier to plant than larger seedlings. You should be storing the seedlings properly before they're planted, both in your storage building, maybe a cool garage or a shed or something. Refrigerated storage is probably ideal, like 40 degrees. If you have that, but also out on the site, really protect those seedlings from drying out as they're being planted. Plant your seedling properly, kind of try to describe how to do an actual planting of seedlings by getting those roots down in the ground well spread, packed tightly after they're in the ground. And then there is this a lot of work that may need to be done after they're planted to take care of them, protect them from deer browsing, release them from competing vegetation. So it takes a lot of work, a little luck from nature, and you can have a successful planting. I've seen years where you get almost 100% survival, 99 would be very, very good. 70 to 80% would be pretty good, but then you have terrible years where maybe you have drought for a couple of years and it kills a lot of them. So, but it takes a lot of work. I guess I'm finished with that. Any questions?
Thanks, Dean. That was great. If you have any questions, please put your questions in the chat box and we'll have Dean answer those. Dean, I have one question for you that we get commonly. How far should people be spacing their trees?
That depends on the purpose of your planting. I would say the recommendation right now, it's changed over the years, but for kind of real pure timber production, we plant them at a closer spacing, maybe 800 per acre, which would be about 8 by 7 foot spacing. But our intent there is for the tree canopy to close. It blocks out the sunlight, the lower branches die and they fall off. And then from that point on, after that after that wound covers up with new growth, you get knot-free wood production. So a close spacing, 800 per acre, 8 by 7 foot spacing was for timber production. But if you want the branches on the trees to be retained longer for many, many more years, maybe for wildlife habitat or visual appearance, you would space your trees out quite a bit more, like maybe 10, 12, even 15 feet apart. And the idea is that those branches will be retained on the lower part of the tree for many more years. So it kind of depends on the purpose of your planting.
Um,
Adam, I'll just mention, just in case folks don't know, the SWCD does have a mechanical tree planter, kind of like what Dean had showed in his photos there. Ours is a little different configuration. Ours is a 2-seater. Same sort of setup though, goes on the back of a tractor off a 3-point hitch. Same sort of deal where it kind of digs the trench in the middle, then you kind of just guide that tree through those packing wheels in the back. If you're interested in renting that, just let us know before you actually do it. That way we can figure out, it works better in certain soils, kind of sandier, drier soils, and not, kind of rocky or gravelly soils are pretty rough on it. So, and then also the number of trees. If you only have 25 or 50 trees, it's probably not worth renting the tree planter. It's more so for larger applications, like if you're doing a couple hundred trees or more, then that's where you're really going to notice it saving you time and money.
Yeah, I can add the DNR has a lot of the local forestry offices have machines for rent, and kind of like Clayton was saying, there's a variety of machines. They work differently. So you would want to, go and look at the machine to see if it can work with your tractor or what it would need to work. Some of them are pretty old. I want to say like probably 40 to 50 years, had a lot of use and a lot of repairs on them.
I do see we have 2 questions. One of them is asking about glossy buckthorn solutions from Dwayne. And we did talk about that earlier with a couple speakers. If you can send me your email, I can send you the recording because this is being recorded for viewing later. Dwayne, if you want to send in the chat box me your email or send it to our office at all, we can get you the earlier discussion. And then Josh Richardson asked about plant skid repellent, which has it been effectively short-term, long-term? If anyone wants to jump in.
Plant skid is one of the repellents that we used to use at the state, and I think they probably still use it.
Yeah.
It was used quite quite a bit, and I think pretty effective. They used to use it a lot in combination with the bud capping. And you may have to do a couple applications for the fall and winter protection, maybe late in the fall or during the fall, and then may have to do a second application later in the winter. But maybe just once with a combination of the bud capping and a repellent. That probably just would need one application in the fall. But it is one I know that the
Yeah,
state.
I was gonna say, I've heard good about that product personally. I know some offices sell it, some water offices.
Mhm.
Yeah, we also, just so you guys know, do sell the tree bars or dibble bars, I think is what we call them. So we sell them and we also rent, or it's a deposit to borrow them. And then we also do sell the cages. So the cages and the sticks to be able to protect your trees. And so we do offer all those. They are part of the order form. So you can utilize those things to help protect your trees.
And then one more thing, if any of the attendees, if you can put in the chat box where you heard about this event, whether it was Facebook, the newspaper, word of mouth, or via our tree sale email, that would be great for us to know how you found out. And I'll pass it back over to Adam.
Perfect.
Thank you very much, Dean.
Yeah,
You're
thanks,
welcome.
Dean.
You're welcome.
We will move on. Our next speaker is Andy McGuire with DNR, and he's going to be talking about forest programs that are available to private landowners. Take it away, Andy.
Thanks. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Perfect. So like Adam said, I will be speaking on our Minnesota forest programs. I work for the DNR Division of Forestry as the incentives coordinator for private lands. So basically anything with private lands and forests and money for landowners falls through me. So I'm going to run through a quick overview of kind of what we got going on in the state. So general overview, PFM is what we usually refer to these foresters at, private forest management. And we work with private landowners to meet their goals and our state goals for natural resources. Our field visits with our CFM versus PFM foresters is free of charge. And we also certify a group of private foresters that help us throughout the state. They are a large working forest. Dean, who just spoke, is one of them. And they just, without them, we couldn't get the work done on private lands without them. Just a map for you. As you can see, you're here in Crow Wing County. Steve Bartz is now the new PFM forester for the area. He's out of the Brainerd office. It's kind of changed hands over the last couple of years. It used to be Alex Brothen, and then it was Carla Sandstrom for a while, in case you've worked with any of them. But for now, it's Steve Bartz. So why is managing private land forests important? Again, we can reach our statewide conservation goals because of the wide range of private and state land and county land we have. Without that private land component, we couldn't reach those goals, including timber, water, air quality, and wildlife habitat. Clean water and carbon sequestration will be pretty major driving factors going into the future, definitely on private lands as well. Like I said, private lands take up about 47% of our Minnesota forests, about 6.8 million acres, and that's why it's so important. About 4.3 million of those acres are in the 20 to 200 acre parcel sizes. Timber markets have kind of gone down a little bit in the last few years, but historically, private lands have been the biggest contributor to timber volume harvested in Minnesota. What is an incentive program? Cost share and other incentive programs are designed to reimburse our landowners for the work they're doing out there, adding to our conservation goals. Without that funding from the government, a lot of this stuff couldn't be done. So that's why we go to the legislature and other organizations to try to get funding for private landowners, because we feel strong that this money definitely helps make these goals happen. And a lot of these benefits, you know, may be realized right off the bat, but some of them you'll never see, but they do benefit the state as a whole, making these projects happen. So where does the DNR help with starting or help with landowners? Our big program where this kind of all comes together is it's a large program run by the U.S. Forest Service. And then within each state agency, they run the program, and it's called the Forest Stewardship Program. Many of you probably have heard of it. It encourages long-term stewardship, and it provides landowners with professional planning and technical assistance that they wouldn't normally get. And like I said, we certify these foresters who are writing these woodland stewardship plans to make sure you're getting a quality product when they're coming out there. And each plan is reviewed by our PFM forester and at the state level as well. And we do register them in a large system and keep track of how many acres are in our programs out there. For a woodland stewardship plan, we do require a minimum of 20 acres of non-ag and non-developed land. Sometimes if you have less acreage than that, we can definitely still help you, but for a woodland stewardship plan, you need that 20 acres. It's the 10-year forest management plan, so they expire after 10 years technically, and it must be written by one of our DNR approved plan writers. So like I said, private consultants, SWCDs, and DNR are the big ones. Private forestry consultants write most of the plans in the state. Just to give you a general idea of costs, the DNR tries to be more expensive than our plan writers, so the business goes to the plan writers, but our DNR cost share rate is base of $350 and then $7 an acre on top of that. And we also provide a $300 reimbursement incentive for having a plan written. So once you get your plan written, we can reimburse you about $300. So what does this kind of look like? Woodland stewardship plan, the big thing is it breaks up your land and looks at all the different cover types. And through those cover types, that forester will make recommendations over the next 10 years and make you a pretty good outline. They're not contracts, they're just a guide for you to manage your forest. So if you don't agree or things change over those 10 years, you definitely don't have to manage it the way the forester did. It's, like I said, it's a guide. If you want more information, the easiest way I still do it is just Google MN Forest Stewardship, and it'll bring you right to our page on the first click. So woodland stewardship plan benefits, like I said, it provides a guide to help you develop and use the land how you want. Many times you can talk with that forester. You know, if you have desire to be able to hunt more deer or more grouse on that property, you can tailor that program to those goals. And it's a very nice part of it. And the other thing is the stewardship plan opens the door to get into one of our other incentive programs. The two big ones are 2C and SFIA, which I will talk about. SFIA is the big one in our state. We just crossed over this year 1 million acres enrolled in the program. So the legislature back in 2002 started the program, and then it got revamped in about 2018. And it's administered both by the DNR and the Department of Revenue. They kind of handle the people and payment side of it, and the DNR forestry handles the land and making sure everything enrolled is enrolled for the right reason and activities aren't going on that aren't supposed to be. Provides yearly incentive payments. So they send you a check in the mail every October for keeping that land forested. That's the incentive. Covenant is recorded on the property. It's a little bit like an easement, but it's not a permanent product. But that covenant, if you do sell the land, does stay with the property for that next owner, or if you pass it down to your next of kin, it also stays with that property. Once it's enrolled, buildings and improvements are not allowed, but if you designate those spots before you enroll it, it's called an exclusion area. You can have your house and building on that property and still be enrolled in SFIA as long as you do it on the front end. But like I said, after that, you can't develop it or use it for agriculture once enrolled. So The deadline every year to enroll new property is October 31st. It requires that woodland stewardship plan. And below is the incentive payment for 2020. So like I said, you can record a covenant length. The options are 8, 20, and 50 years. The longer you enroll it, the more payment you get every year. And it's, as you can see there, those payments are per acre. So the more you enroll, the bigger the payment as well. And a good thing to know, if you do go in just the 8-year program and think it ends after 8 years, that's not the case. It will stay with the property forever or until you ask it to be released from the program, but that's the minimum amount of time it can be enrolled in the program. The other one is 2C managed forest land. This one's a little bit less restrictive, and it doesn't give you a payment, but it does change the tax classification of your property. So in Minnesota, all properties, lands start at 1% tax rate and will change depending on the use. But what this does is it reduces the forest area to 0.65%. Same thing, you can't develop it or use it for agriculture or subdivide the property. You have to apply by May 1st annually, still requires that woodland stewardship plan. But there's no minimum length requirement. So if you get into it, you don't like it, you can get out that next year if the county lets you. And that's the other big thing to know, it is administered by the county. It's not administered by the DNR. We just manage the stewardship plans and let them know who has an active stewardship plan so they can change that tax code. It's kind of getting into a little bit more project level assistance. There's state and federal programs, and I'll hit on the state first. So we have our Minnesota State Cost Share Assistance Program, and it's really nice that the presentations before, all those projects fall under cost share, and I'll kind of hit on that. So we have money available for forestry related projects on private lands. There's no minimum requirements. So if you are under that 20 acres, you have 5 acres of buckthorn you're trying to manage, you can use cost share. So it's really nice that those smaller landowners still have the ability to get in and use some cost share. It's supposed to be a 50-50 cost share rate, but we do have set rates, so that might not always fall into line. You could make a little bit more money or you could spend a little bit more money. One landowner can use up to $10,000 per year, but a maximum size of a project has to be $5,000. And that just has to do with some statutes that are kind of out of our control. It is a reimbursement program. So you do have to front the costs when you set up a project, and say it's a planting, you do have to buy those seedlings on their own, and you don't get paid until that project's done. A plan writer can set up the project, but at the end of the day, the DNR forester has to come out and certify it and make sure that work's done. Additionally, if you do a planting, part of it can't get done if it's too wet, you can still get paid for part of the project. You don't have to complete the whole project if it's out of your hands, which can happen a lot if you're working with contractors. So kind of give you some examples. Like Dean said, there's those tree tubes he was talking about. We cost share those, we cost share the seedlings, and you can also see in that picture that there's some brown grass there, and that'd be for competition control of the weeds. So that'd be maybe one whole project you'd set up. You set up the planting, the protection, and the spraying all in one project. Get it done in the spring, and it's kind of a nice way to do it. Other examples, improving your forest health. Say you have a nice stand of trees that you're trying to improve the quality of. There's box elder in there. There's maples you might not want. We can help you remove those with some cost share funds. Burning is an activity, and so are goats, like Minnesota Native Landscapes hit on. We can cost share animal control of buckthorn and other invasive species. This is a sample of a project plan. What's really nice is we try to keep this as simple as possible. Some of these programs out there, especially on the federal level, can get a little more complicated. And what we've tried to do with our state program is keep it simple, make it easy for the landowner. just to benefit the state. We don't want to make you jump through a ton of hoops to get your reimbursement. We want to see those trees in the ground and trees improved out on our landscape. So then we can jump into the federal cost share programs. I don't control these programs, but I touch them and try to coordinate with our federal partners to make them better, but that's not always the case, and I just don't have a lot of weight in it, but I will let you know a little bit about them. The first one is EQIP. It's the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. Pretty much the same thing as our cost share program, but it's run by the NRCS. Bigger projects and a bigger program. There's also CRP, and that's run by the Farm Service Agency. So sometimes that gets a little confusing who runs which program, but quick Google will bring you to the right page and who you need to talk to. What CRP does is it rents your land. So a lot of times an agriculture producer will have a field that might not be producing anymore, but they don't want to stop production necessarily, so they can go into CRP. And what CRP will do is basically pay the landowner a rental fee to not farm it anymore, and protect those natural resources. You might get paid to plant it, prairie or trees. It's a long-term goal program that's established to, recover the land basically. So when thinking about these, I like to look at them side by side. On the federal level, they can have a lot more specific goals compared to our cost share program. The nice thing about it is there's a ton more money available per project. They pay you way more to plant trees than we do. The only issue is it's a very large applicant pool. You are competing against the whole nation. And what they do is they weight the scoring. And so Crow Wing County might be weighted less than a county down in southwest Minnesota because there's way more agriculture down there and less trees. So they will weight that differently. There's very specific sign-up times, and it can take a year or two to even get approved for a project. And that's the nice thing about our state funds. It's less money, but we can sign you up and you can be approved for a project 2 weeks later, and that money's available for that project. So it's a little bit quicker, but like I said, less money and more flexibility. And usually, you're working directly with a forester, where if you go into CRP or EQIP, they might approve you, but they might not give you the resources to get that project done, depending on what's going on. So like I said, that's kind of an overview. EQIP and CRP vary greatly on the projects and geographical areas. General rule of thumb, if you have a very large project you're trying to complete with a lot of goals, federal might be worth waiting the time to get that more money. If you got a smaller project that you want to get done quickly, the state might be the better option for you. We also offer timber sale assistance. DNR foresters can help you set up a timber sale. The service fee is 13%. The one big factor with using a DNR forester compared to a private consultant, though, is we cannot actually administer the sale. So once the cutting begins, we really can't help you. You're kind of on your own, unfortunately. And that's where it's really advantageous to go to a private consultant. They can help you set it up. They know the markets, and they can also administer the sale as it's being cut. So that's kind of a real quick general overview of our programs. The best way to start, like I said, Google is usually even what I use still. Just Google MN DNR PFM. I'll bring you to that map, and you can click on Steve Bart's info. Otherwise, my info is listed on the slide right there.
Thanks, Andy. Any questions for Andy regarding private forest management stuff, private forest programs that you might be interested in?
Yeah, thanks, Andy, for the updates.
Yeah.
I'm not seeing any questions. So I guess we'll move on. Our next speaker is Christina Soames. She's works kind of at the nursery, and she will be giving you an update on nursery status, stuff like that. Christina, are you here?
Yeah, I see she's unmuted.
I'm trying my headset.
There we go. Now
Can
we
you hear me
ya.
now?
We
Yep.
can.
Okay, my other speaker must not be working on my little camera, so apologize for that. All right, well, thank you. I don't have a PowerPoint. I was just going to give a brief update kind of on the nursery and what 2020 had in store for us and how that's going to impact a couple things for us going forward. So 2020 in the spring, we did not do our main spring lift. So we were able to get seedlings out for soil and water conservation districts, and hopefully a lot of you as customers from Soil and Waters. But that was from our fall lifted stock. Due to COVID, we were not approved to do our lifting for last spring. We are approved right now. As of right now, I should say that can change at any moment. But we are planning our spring lift for this year. We were allowed and able to execute our fall lifting, though Mother Nature did have some other twists and turns for us with 2 weeks of snow in October during our normal lifting period. So we do plan and anticipate to be able to lift our seedling stock as anticipated this year. We do know that there will be some changes for our stock availability next year and the year after due to some of the changes from what we were able to seed in 2020. So we did not have approval to have staff back early in 2020 during our kind of most critical time for our seeding, our transplanting, some of those activities. So we do anticipate some availability shortages and delays for 2022 and 2023. We will not have our transplant stock available in 2022 as we were not able to transplant in 2020, and those take 2 years to grow. And there are a couple other species as well, not as common or maybe of high demand, but we expect inventories to be either lower because we had to do delayed seeding, so they might be smaller or take an extra year to get to the shippable size. So if you are looking at purchasing through us or doing your seedling ordering directly through the nursery, please be aware that there might be some inventory changes or shortages over the next couple years here as well. And then obviously for Soil and Waters, you guys know, especially for our transplants, when you're getting stock from us, that there will be some impacts there. Other than that, for this year, we have had a pretty hectic year in terms of seedling sales because of the cancellations from last year. So if you are still looking for seedlings directly from the nursery, especially in large quantities, we are pretty limited on what is still available. The best place to find that out is to visit our website directly. At the DNR, you can just Google DNR seedling sales or seedling State Forest Nursery, and that'll bring you up to the page, and that'll have the updates on what is still available, but it is pretty limited in terms of the species and the sizes that are yet available here at the nursery for 2021 that will be coming out this spring. So that's just kind of a general update. I don't know if there's any specific questions for me or anything regarding nursery operations. Like I said, we are planning and have everything in process to continue and hopefully have a relatively normal 2021 in terms of our seeding and everything going as smoothly as possible, barring Mother Nature throwing us any curveballs. So.
Great, that's a good update. Just so everybody is aware, and I'll post your contact information in the chat. She does work for the Bedora Nursery. So if you're interested, generally the DNR takes bigger orders. It's more than 300 trees, correct?
500. So minimum order with us, yeah, from a private customer must be 500 seedlings at least. Yep.
Perfect. So if you have a bigger order, certainly you can order through us or order through the DNR. but yeah, we're excited to get our trees, and we really appreciate that. So
Yeah, thank you, Christina. How stressful for you guys this past year.
I think it's been stressful for everyone this
Oh
year.
my.
If anybody has any questions for Christina, feel free to post them in the chat, and we will get to them. So if we have no questions, this is kind of the portion where we're gonna have like a breakout session. You are more than welcome to attend. I will post what that will look like here. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, I think we just had someone join in. So just to reiterate, these presentations today have been recorded. So I will be able to send those to you. Please send me your email. You can do that in the chat box. You can either send it to everyone, or you can specifically select Crow Wing SWCD or any of our staff and send me your email, and we can get that over to you. And then if you have any other specific questions too. You see here the agenda Adam's got up.
Yes, so kind of the way these breakout sessions will work, Tasha will post 2 different links that you're more than welcome to click on and go to. It'll shoot you to another, I think it's Google Meets, and you can ask questions. There'll be one link that's dealing with, tree sale order stuff, so you can get your tree sale order in today if you'd like. Otherwise, tree sale order questions. If you have questions about our tree sale, you can ask forestry questions, questions about the Pine River One Watershed One Plan. And there'll be another link that we posted if you have questions about shoreline restorations, rain gardens. If you're looking at conservation easements, we'd be happy to answer your questions. So Tasha will post 2 different links. Feel free, you can jump between both of them if you'd like. If you have questions regarding both topics in either one of those. So feel free to click on those links. We will shoot ourselves over there. And Clayton and Tasha will be for the tree sale ordering, and me and Sheila will be for the shoreline restorations one. So come get your questions answered if you have them. So Sheila, you got anything to add?
If you just want to run through that slideshow right now of what you've got up. And
sure.
I think she's just getting organized. Anyone have any other questions right now? I've just admitted another person here. So I think we want to keep this open for a little bit.
Yes.
Definitely stay on here.
And then I'll stay on here too, and you can
Right.
ask my questions. If you want to go to that next slide, we can just talk about the pickup.
Yeah, good idea.
So again, just 4 different ways to order. You can order online, you can call us, or you can also mail in orders. We're still taking that. And then we'll let you know, we'll remind you, but the trees will be picked up at the Crow Wing County Fairgrounds at the curling building. And so this map is actually of our office, but you're welcome to come here. We can still meet you if you come inside as well, if you want to chat with us. But those dates are May 6th through the 7th, which is also, again, I'm hoping that everything goes well with the DNR nursery so that we can have that on time. But Mother Nature does play into some of those logistics. And then if you click to the next slide, I'll show you what our website looks like. So we have a brand new shop page. So if you go to the top and go to shop, you can kind of pick what you're looking for. And then each of these items you can click on, and then there's additional information about each of those items. And you can, like I said, just place the order all online. And you can look through the entire thing of different options and, place your order there, or you can give us a call. And you can also join one of these sessions to ask your specific questions. And then I did want to highlight a few new things. One of the new things that we partnered with Minnesota Natives Landscapes on, it's actually their idea, which I think is brilliant, is they're calling it My Pocket Prairie, where basically they're going to ship you everything you need to develop your own little prairie for a 10 by 10 plot. And so we will place the order with Minnesota Natives, and then they will ship you everything. So that won't actually get picked up at our tree sale, but it will be shipped to your house. And then we also do have some new additional seed mixes. I don't know, Sheila, if you want to touch on those a little bit. Or it's fine.
I'm copying the link right now into the chat box for people to join in the 2 different sessions.
Yeah, so we do have some bigger mixes. So we used to just kind of do the 500 square feet. So we do have a bigger mix of 5,000 square feet. And you can see on the screen the stuff that's sort of new is the new arrival. And then again, I guess I just wanted to also just mention again the tree planter. And then we also have the stakes and tubes, and then those dibble bars for planting. And then we also do offer cost share dollars to help with different projects. So if you do have questions about that, we can also answer those questions for this coming year.
Okay, I do have in the chat box, there's 2 different breakout sessions. We just separated them out into a forestry or tree sale related group. The first one I posted, and then the second one is for like easement or shoreline questions or any other tree sale questions. I do see there's a question about breakout session for sure. Yeah, so the second one the last posted link. And then they also asked, what is the cost of the trees? We can actually, Adam, can you put into the chat box the order form? I don't know if it was in there yet.
I did.
Okay.
But I can pull it up
just
too.
stay in here since we don't have a whole lot of questions. Like, it's hard to see in the chat where to go.
Yeah, if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask right now. I'll open up the other one too, just in case.
I thought I posted the tree sale order form. It should be there. Otherwise, I can certainly pull it up right now if you'd like me to.
While Adam's doing that, I just also wanted to say thank you guys for taking your time to attend this meeting. Hopefully it was helpful, and we know it was a lot of information, and thank you to all the partners that spoke and provided information. And then I guess just thanks to all of our tree sale customers. Again, I always feel like this is like the best time of the year, seeing all you guys, and then also just the amount of people that continue to keep buying trees and doing their part. It's a great program, and we could not do it without you guys. So thank you.
I'm gonna jump off.